Jung at Harp. Today we are going to talk about searching for simple, for simplicity, for the simple. I'm Deborah Henson-Conant, and I'm here with Kathleen Wiley. I'm a composer and I'm a performer, and Kathleen is a Jungian psychoanalyst. We both play the harp, so we call this Jung at Harp. So today, Kathleen, we had a lot of subjects we were thinking about talking about, but I requested that we talk about searching for simple because I struggle with it. And while I teach about simplicity, and I'm about to teach a class in the blues, which is such a simple art form and so expressive, while I can break it down in music, I struggle with it in other parts of my life. And there have been so many times when I've been writing or putting together a web page or something like that, where the coach that I'm working with will be like, keep it simple, keep it simple. And they can say that till they're blue in the face. I don't know how. I don't always know how to break things down to what's simple in other parts of my life. So I wanted to talk about how we can go about searching for simple if we don't automatically have it.
Right.
And what is simple? I mean, like in music, I know, for example, if I'm playing something and I'm playing, I know that there are parts to this. I can break this down. I can say there's a bass line, that F, the way the music is moving has to do with that lowest note. So I can break it down to that, and then I can say all the rest of these notes are coming off of that note. So if I could only do one thing that would keep me together with this, or if I was going, which is even more complex because it also has a rhythm, but I had to connect with that, or I had to tell you how to connect with it. I could say, look, just play the F and the C, or if you didn't even play the harp, I could say, just play, when I nod my head, just play the black note, and then the red note, and then the black note, and then the red. So I could take all the complexity out of there and say to someone, you can be part of this by just doing this, something you can see at this moment. That's great for music, but when it comes to other things in my life, nobody's there saying, when I put my head like this, touch the red one. And that's what I need. So how can I find that for myself?
Yeah, as you're talking about it, I'm thinking about Jung having said about the human psyche that we are a complex of opposites. So part of the question that we're exploring today really has to do with how do we begin to see all of the various factors within our own nature, which are often opposite, they're opposing one another. And then how do we distill it down or drop under to what is most important in that moment? The simple. When I think about searching for simple in terms of how we live our life, I immediately go to kind of the values and the things that are most important to us that we want to hold on to, that one thing, because part of the word simple means unity. It means oneness. And so we're immediately in this kind of on the horns of a dilemma, and that we want to move with the unity, but yet within our own nature are these complex of opposites that might be coming to bear in any given moment. So that's the first thing I went to. The other thing I was thinking as you were talking about bass and accompaniment and melody, I was thinking about the head, the heart, and the gut. That if for purposes of what we're exploring about simple, we want to think for a minute about our gut, our automatic, reflexive, sympathetic nervous system responses of fight, flight, and freeze as the baseline. And the problem is the sympathetic nervous system also is the place from which we can feel human connection. But if we're caught in fight, flight, or freeze, there's no movement towards connection. Fight is a hostile engagement. Fleeing is leaving, and freeze, nothing happens. So, and then we've got to consider the heart, which we might think about as the accompaniment, all of the emotions and passions and desires that are at work in any given situation. And then our head, which tends to be the melody, you know, we tend to follow along with our conscious thinking. And so in some ways, the simple, just like in music, might be a recognition that there are these various expressions of the same song, so to speak, of the same state of consciousness we're in. There's the baseline, what's going on in our gut. There is the heart response, which is all of the feeling and passion. And then there is kind of the leading melody that's directing attention, i.e. the thoughts. And I don't know that I'm helping the issue here of searching for simple.
Well, there's a lot that's going on here. I'm thinking, wow, I want to play that out. I want to literally play that out on my instrument, what you just said. That's number one. Number two, I was thinking about how when we get back to the essential, like if we look to blues and we get back to the essential, once we connect with the essential, it starts getting more complex again as we express it, but it's often more complex in a way that is more in tune with ourselves. Mm-hmm. So that was the second thing I thought of that I really want to explore. And then the third thing I wanted to explore was when you talked about fight, flight, or freeze. And then I thought about engagement, and you said, so fighting is physical, and you go towards someone in aggression. The difference between that and going towards someone in dancing or in lovemaking or just in hugging mm-hmm. is really a style, almost like a different style. But it may be. I'd love to hear if that's true. Mm-hmm. And then I thought about and in flight, animals are always playing by chasing each other, and dogs are always like, I go to the dog park and they're all like they do this thing like, come on, chase me, come on. And then like, come on, let's go. And so the chasing is also the fleeing is part of play and engagement. And when you can be still and be loved and be held, that is also human engagement. Mm-hmm. So fight, flight, and freeze, when those same, what is it? Is it a different style? Is it a different intention? They can also be engagement.
It's a reflexive defense maneuver. I mean, yeah, the fight, flight, or freeze are all very, in terms of human behavior and relationships where it's problematic, they're all defensive postures that break the connection with another. What you're describing in animals with that playful aggression, it's playful. We talked about play the last 2 weeks. That's a different, that's not fighting. That is,
I know.
That's a play, but it is a movement towards.
Right. And so it's really like depending on how you're observing it and how you're engaging in it.
Right.
Almost exactly the same response is one of engagement versus one of disconnect.
Right.
Now that's a whole different subject, which different than simplicity, but what you said just made me think about that. The opposite.
Right. Now I was thinking about simple, and in relationship, the what is behind fight, flight, or freeze is the survival instinct. And instincts are unconscious, they're automatic, they're reflexive. We have no control over them. They just show up when they show up. They operate the way they operate. And part of the dilemma is that the sympathetic nervous system still operates as if we are in the jungle wild having to fight animals. So we have automatic responses to things as if it's the lion we need to kill or be killed by, when it really isn't a lion. It's just our coach saying, keep it simple, or it's the traffic that's warning.
Right. Yeah, I hear that all the time. Thank you for not saying saber-toothed tiger. And I think about it because I'm not going to go into how it is the same. because these are real challenges. They're real. They truly can, you know, kill us in a similar way, and we truly can create community to support ourselves, just like we could have with the cave in the cave. We can create community so that we can be safe while one person is watching for the saber-toothed tigers. We can work together. I mean, there's all kinds of things. So these are instinctual, and the instincts still, I think, hold today. But now I'm off on my soapbox. Let's come back. Unless you...
Well, I mean, I want to pick up on what you're saying, because I think it is true that the reason that primitive psyche kicks in for little children and these automatic defensive patterns, whether we have a predisposition to fight, flee, or just freeze, come about because there is a experience of the death of self, a death of one's sense of personhood, a death of any sense of value and worth as a separate individual. So young children who are shamed for doing what's natural to them, you often can just see it on their face, or you see them change where all of a sudden the natural, effulgent, outward moving, expressive child they were just gets stymied, and it's like they become a little robot, because there has been a psychological death of self. So you are right, those instincts are kicking in around survival. It's no longer a survival of the physical body for the most part. I mean, there are, of course, situations where that's true. The problem, the problem is that what we all want most, if we're going to keep it simple, and we believe Jung, as well as some other psychologists, philosophers, etc., is what we want more than anything is connection. We want human connection.
Right.
And so if you say something to me that is a different point of view, and I'm caught in my insecurity, and I've had some negative feedback from, let's say, a supervisor or something, and that all of a sudden you're just offering a different point of view, but I may filter it through a lens of, oh my God, I have no value or worth as a psychoanalyst. I don't know what I'm talking about. And so my survival fear kicks in, and I come back at you hostilely. That doesn't help at all.
It's making me think that a subject for another one of these would be, how do you know when you're alive? How do you know when you're dead? You know, what's the difference between these two things?
Yeah.
I definitely, I want to come back to searching for simple, and you were just talking about how when we're attacked, when we are attacked in some way, our physical, and I think often when our non-physical self is attacked, another subject for another day that I'd like to ask you is it easier to recover from a physical attack or from a non-physical attack? How do we recover from each of these? So there's that. But coming back to the subject of searching for simple, so I get very scared when I am not doing something simply, and somebody says, keep it simple, just do it simply, just get simple. And I have no idea how to do that, how to break it down. I see that we're getting a comment, which is always exciting to read these. Even when we're in a safe and nurturing environment, sometimes we can experience feelings that catapult us into fight, flight, or freeze because of our own insecurities from past traumas. So exactly. Yeah. So this is the perfect situation. When I am told, keep it simple, or when I'm telling myself that, when I realize that I'm trapped in complexity of something or another. Like right now, I'm in the midst of a really big, 7-year project that has a whole bunch of different moving parts. And I'm afraid I'm doing it wrong, and I'm not keeping up, I don't have the right documentation, blah, blah, blah. I'm in this whole thing. I'm so scared that I'm doing it wrong and that I don't know how to keep it simple and that I've taken on too much. I mean, I've got all this stuff that I don't know how to search for the simple. So it's like I'm fleeing, and there's maybe, but I don't even know where to go. I'm just running around in circles. How do I, and maybe the answer is that the first thing to do is to deal with this, not to try to answer the question about how to search for the simple, but what is in my way emotionally making me anxious about this.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is really why it's so important that we each do our own work of consciousness and get to know our own unconscious, our own our own personal history has kind of created an inner world through which we then filter things. And Elizabeth's comment is speaking to that we can be completely safe, but there's a trigger that sends us into a memory, a body state where we didn't feel safe, and then we're not in the present moment. And so, when we feel overwhelmed, I often think it is because there is something from the past that emotionally is getting activated. And overwhelm in a way is kind of like a freezing or a drowning. When people are overwhelmed, it's hard to think. They can't really take action. I always say to people that I work with when they're talking about overwhelm or confusion, is start with what you know. If all you know is, I'm Kathleen Wiley, I'm here in my office in Cheryl's Ford, I'm talking to Deborah Henson-Conant. If that's all I know, write it down. Start with what you know. Start with what you know about the 7-year project. Start with what you know about your overwhelm. Start with and it's amazing the power of that, because we always know far more than our ego can access in any given moment.
One of the things I'm hearing that you're saying is that in that moment, we are engaged in focus. Engaged in the activity of focus. So for example, that I gave here, there's all this stuff, and I should probably pull this down. If I'm doing something that's got a lot of complexity, to break it down and even to be able to say, hello, oh, this is my hand. My hand has 5 fingers on it. The fingers are touching the instrument. And then I can start to break it down. Now, again, I can do this with my physicality and my instrument, but so I hear what you're saying, that starting with what I know, it panics me. So, but I can, so I think what you're saying right now is, like, I would have to break it down even more. I would have to say, start with what you know. Start with what your mom would have pinned on your, like I would, when I went out for walking, I would have like a pin. I'm Deborah and I live here, and, send me back if I'm lost, something like that. But then I would like to have it broken down in other ways. What do you know about blank? What do you know about blank? So what are those blanks? What do you know about, what's the A, the B, and the C?
Well, for me, and work with people and in our own experience, the blanks start with, what do I know are my thoughts? What are the fantasy images that are going through my mind? What do I know about the feelings and the affects and the emotions that I'm having that are coming up in those images? And what are the body sensations where all of this is rooted?
Now, Kathleen, this is your area of expertise. So to me, that's already so complex. I would need to be like, where is your right thumb?
Well, I'm only laughing because I think it's so true. And I said this to one of my the training candidates that I'm supervising, someone who's already a seasoned therapist who's training to be a psychoanalyst. I said to her this week, have you ever seen those sheets of faces with feelings underneath them that people use? I said, get yourself one of those sheets and put it on your clipboard, because we all have to learn how to reconnect with that emotion and to name it. I mean, that's just a deficit, and that's a deficit in how in human consciousness that we're still trying to heal. I think we're still trying to get back to know. And so you may start with, okay, when I feel overwhelmed, what happens in my gut, or what happens in my hand, or what happens to my inner thought process? I mean, again, we have to break it down in whatever direction we have to break it down. And that is part of the alchemical process of transformation, is everything has to be distilled to its purest essence. So, everything. Everything.
And that's a search for sure for the simple. JT is saying, Kathleen's comment about overwhelm and starting with what you know are spot on. When we're overwhelmed, we've lost touch with the fundamental, the base, that which gives meaning to everything above it. You can't build the melody over the wrong notes. But of course you can. It's just going to be it's going to be a reharmonization. And but I totally hear what you're saying. It's going to be a reharmonization. If we build the melody over a different fundamental note, it's gonna be we're gonna have a different result. Kathleen, you're making me think, when I was a kid, I had this it's been called an obsession. I don't know whether it was an obsession or not, but I would say over and over and over again, see the cow, 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 see the cow. So now we lived in cow country. And I think it was because I was at that point where I was learning, this is a cow, this is a dog, this is a horse, this is a chicken, so I could tell the difference. And I think my mother would point to, see the cow, see the cow, see the cow, see the cow. But I would say this for an hour. If we'd be driving through cow country, I would say it. And I had an obsession that I had to say it for every single cow. Like they all had to be named. But I'm thinking about what you're saying about naming things, giving things a name. And I'm actually feeling really emotional when I say that, because for me, I often feel extremely disoriented, like at all times. Just disoriented, which is, I think, a beautiful thing, because it's allowed me, I have what I call alien orientation syndrome. Things that seem obvious to other people, they're not obvious to me. And I think that's why, I was able to imagine a harp that would be completely different, that you can wear and that it's like this. But at the same time, there is, unless something has a name tag on it, I don't remember what it is. I have to really oh, right, that's a harp. Okay. Shape, got that. So I think there's something to this naming, just to orient ourselves in space and time. Now, is it good? Is it bad? I don't know, but I certainly know that it is calming to reorient ourselves.
Well, it's calming because we live in a physical plane, and we need to consciously connect to the ground in which we live. And the first ground of our being is our body. I couldn't help but think, DHC, when you were just talking about yourself, in Jung's theory, he talks about psychological types. And he says that the rational functions are thinking and feeling, and the non-rational are sensation and intuition. And you're clearly an intuitive, which means you see all the possibilities. So what then is what Jung would have called your inferior function, what you cannot consciously access, is sensation, which is to say, oh, this is the ground. Okay, this is my, this is my mouse,
Right.
Or to say internally, this is my fear of this, or this is my desire. It's like what's missing is the sensation of function of being able to actually say, this is what's happening in my body, and what I know the feeling is, that it's our emotion that's accompanying it. And so part of what my essential embodiment practices classes is actually to begin to help people have practices to pay attention, because most of us don't even pay attention to how our body is responding to something until we're so disconnected from our body, it's affecting us negatively.
Wow. So we're not aware of when we are connected. We're not aware of how and So Kathleen, I want to ask about
Yeah.
that because so I mean, when I worked with my teacher Tony, one of the things that we did was called rounds, and that means that we would take something, could be anything, and we would look at all the possible things it was. And we wouldn't look at it intellectually; we would just play with it.
Mhm.
So while this might initially be glasses, and we might look at them backwards, and then eventually it would be a bird, and then it would turn into many, many different things. So when you said that I'm always seeing all the possibility. That's I've been trained to do that. And my fear is that if I ground in this is a this, I'm going to lose that world in which things are constantly able to transform from one thing to another.
Well, I mean, I'm not God and I'm not your life force, so I can't say with certainty. But my guess is that isn't going to happen. I think what it will actually do is it will actually allow you to take more of those creative energies and bring them into a form that you can share. And it will allow, and you do a lot of that anyway, but I think that it would allow you perhaps to do that more smoothly, more easily. Because in truth, if something doesn't come into form, nothing ever gets expressed. I mean, look at us. We have bodies that are very different. If we didn't have our bodies that are very specific forms, you're tall and slender, and I'm kind of a little short and Venus of Willendorf-like, I like to think, Rubenesque. I mean, but if we didn't have that form, we wouldn't have a way of moving in the world. And so I think that, intuitives get afraid of form and sensation, right. But without sensation, intuition never really gets to live and breathe and be seen in the world. Thus, great art brings that something, that spirit, that essence into form, in a form that encapsulates the soul in a way that can be experienced. So when you said with Tony and the rounds, you weren't looking at things intellectually, you were, but the intellect wasn't in charge. What was in charge, the intellect was serving the intuitive function. The intellect was serving and paying attention to the sensate experiences and the images that arose. Because part of how we know what's happening in our body, sensation-wise, is we pay attention to the images that come. Because the images arise spontaneously as a picture of what's happening in our body, physically, central nervous system.
Well, you're also making me go back and re-examine what I said about that game, which was, well, first of all, the game itself had a form, and there was form, and we come back to this over and over again all the time. No matter what we start talking about, we seem to come back at the term form, inform, perform, transform. And the other form of the game was that we would take one object and we would explore all the possibilities of it. And that brings me back to thinking about this, because I'm just about to teach it, the blues, which is such a simple form. And yet what I'm realizing, so the blues is, the blues is basically 3 chords, and in a certain format. And I'll just, it's like, this is the 1 chord, and then this is the 4 chord, but it doesn't even go there all the time, and this is the 1 chord, and that's the first phrase. The second phrase has the 4 chord, and once again the 4 chord, and then we come back to the 1 chord, and then the last phrase we have the 5 chord, and then the 4 chord, and then the 1, and then we can do. But by getting very simple, which really is, we've got the 1 chord, 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 oh, we got the 4 chord. I mean, that's in its simplest form, but I'm realizing when we take a form like that, which can be deeply simple, and we really ground in it, like what you were saying, ground in anything, then it can then take on our personality and characteristics. You know, then I can start playing around with it. Or even if I keep it simple, I can express how hard it is to try to find the simple in anything. You know, so I can take that simple form and use it to help me express myself. And for me, it's not scary to do something that's 12 bars and that seems like it's a constriction. It doesn't feel like a constriction. But in other parts of my life, I may not get that this simplification is in the service of being able to express more of myself.
Yes. Yeah.
And JT has spoken again.
Yeah.
I like to think of labels forms as Post-its. They can allow you to orient yourself in the moment and develop your ideas. I wanted to mention that based on that orientation, but the labels are not permanent. And I was going to say that because one of the things that's so powerful about music is that it shifts key or it shifts modes. And I just said I was playing a 1, a 4, a 5. Well, that 1, 4, 5 can be all kinds of different 1, 4, 5s in different modes, in different keys, in different rhythms. So I really love this in that what I hear JT saying is orientation doesn't have to be forever. It can be in the moment. I'm oriented this way in this moment.
Yeah, and forms don't have to be permanent. And in fact, if we look at some of the esoteric spiritual teachings, like the Tree of Life from the Kabbalah, we see that as soon as something comes into form, then the form starts to die, because once something becomes a form, it loses the charge. You think about pieces of music that you wrote, you performed, and then you never went back to them because they lost the energetic charge once they were in the form. Now you're circling back to say, maybe there is still energy there and it's of value. Maybe it still holds, it's a form that still can allow me and other people to connect to an essence that is valuable to spirit, is how I would say it.
Well, you know, that's really interesting because I actually have, in a way, the opposite issue in that I feel like I'm not done with almost any of the music that I've ever sung or learned or played. And therefore it becomes very difficult to publish it because I never feel that it is in finished form, that I'm just presenting one moment of it. And that's actually part of my struggle in searching for the simple is to, and maybe I really just need a Post-it, like JT said. And it's interesting because JT is actually part of this project with me, and that Post-it is saying, this is this point in time. This is how this exists in this point in time. And I kind of hear that this is what you were saying before when we're searching for simple, when we're in the complete complexity of it, of the time, of the rhythm, of, you know, whatever it is, of the relationships, of the conflicts, of all the things we talked about today, is to find that Post-it that lets us say, okay, you are here right now. And what is here and what is around here? And let's just start there. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to even look for the simple, but just actually start saying, what do you see? What do you feel? What do you notice?
And if you do that, then you are beginning to access the simple and the sense of connecting to things in their purest essence. You know, if I can just say, in this moment, I feel this, or in this moment, my body is doing this. And if I pay attention, I'll probably find in 5 minutes is saying and doing something totally different. You know?
Well, you know, I'm thinking if I sit down with a 7-year project and I start writing down what is, even thinking about it, I'm just so nervous. And I'm thinking, okay, so if that's the case, then I need to believe that I need to take that moment, that nervousness, take a different piece of paper, write down all of that. When I come back over here, if the nervousness comes back, I'm going to have to do it again, and make that commitment to myself of actually orienting myself to myself,
Yes.
and acknowledging where I am right now, regardless of where I think I should be. This is who I am right now, a bundle of nerves, afraid of this for whatever reason. And I'm going to acknowledge that and actually look at it and share it with myself.
Yeah, I think you just said what to me is the biggest takeaway for today, is that in searching for simple, to find it, we have to orient ourselves to ourselves. That's the first step. That if I'm going to find what's simple for me and my relationships and to other people, my relationship to my heart, I have to orient myself to me and see what is going on for me in the moment, both in my head, my heart, and my gut.
And what's actually easy for me, because that's what I'm able to say to students.
That's right.
What's easy for you to see and grasp?
That's right. Yeah.
And it's hard. That's difficult because most often people are thinking, but that's not right, but that's not enough, but that's not, but I couldn't do that. That's cheating. So all this stuff happens. And yet that feeling of this is too, maybe even to look for, this is too easy. This is too easy. That's actually the beautiful, that's the opening.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, when we orient ourselves to ourselves, then we see all of this kind of talk that can sabotage us accessing the simple, like a judgment. Oh, that's too easy. Oh, that's not good enough, or whatever it is.
Right.
And I think the other thing you said that I want to reiterate, that I think it's also true in our search for simple, is the recognition that anything we say, any expression we have in relationship, any piece of music we improvise or compose is one moment in time. It is an expression in that moment at that time, with all of the complex of opposite variables in us and around us coming together in a specific form.
As you were saying that, I was thinking, well, yeah, that's right, unless you put it on Instagram or put it on YouTube. But then and so there's my fear of speaking.
Yeah.
But I also think that, but that is the only way in which we can do it. Because if we're searching for, like, I'm going to make this for posterity and it will be the greatest definitive, then we're creating something that's, I guess, not alive anymore.
Absolutely. And that is the form that starts to die immediately. When something gets locked in, there's no longer any possibility for change, then it does start to get rigid and lifeless. And we see this is what happens collectively in institutions. Institutions that were once very much alive and valuable and vital in community, a lot of those institutions no longer are, because they got codified into form, into dogma, into ideas that became static. There was no infusion of life, of spirit from the outside. And yeah.
Well, you're giving me a whole new concept of sheet music.
Okay.
In that the fact is, there is no way to document everything about the expression. All you can do is give the notes, and you can give some indication. But the beauty of it is that, I don't play from sheet music and I don't read it well, but I need to write out, or JT's helping me write out the sheet music of the music so that others can. And I think what you just gave me is the understanding of the fact that we must not make it perfect.
Right.
Because, and we don't even have to try to not make it perfect. It's going to be easy to not make it perfect. That's simple. And and that it is in the sharing, so that it can live in others, so that others can interpret it, that it stays alive.
Yes, and what you just said right there, I think is so important. It is in the living. It is in the relating. We always go back to, again, how key and central relating is. And so it goes to the relationship that the musician brings to the sheet music. That's where the music happens. It's
Right.
not by technically playing what's on the sheet of paper.
Right. It's allowing the sheet to release something in them. And I want to jump to what Elizabeth's saying. As a beginner harpist, I have all these ideas of what I want to do with music, but right now I'm technically challenged. So I just want to say, Elizabeth, in my 7-year project, I have all these ideas. And so we're always technically challenged. That will never go away. And I know that I have to keep it simple, but tell myself this is temporary. And I think that's great. And I also want to encourage you, as I want to encourage myself, to understand that a single note may seem like it's not everything, but it also can be everything. It can be so much. And I want to remember what I tell people that I'm teaching, students, and is that note is the fundamental. That note is also this. It is everything that can become. And if we can ground into that note and really play the thing that we can play now with complete heart, it will then start to expand. And it doesn't, in part it expands because we're calm. You see, it's easy for me to say this about music, and I wish I could hear it. So I'm saying it to myself about life. When I allow myself to really do that thing that's simple that I can do, it opens up my brain to allow the next step in from a simple concept, and then those simple concepts are all around. I teach them in the academy, that's a fundamental note. You can build notes up from it, and you can substitute them, all the things you can do. So I think what I'm learning today, Kathleen, my takeaway is that I'm going to go for what seems too simple to me, for what I think I should be doing more, and really say, this is where I am. This is the point that I really connect. And I know we're getting wonderful comments, and I know we both need to go.
Yeah.
So let's.
But I want to speak to what Elizabeth is saying, and JT's comment here about artists and musicians enliven their fixed forms. The life is in the form, and then the life is in the musician, and not in the life form.
Yes.
In the form, I want to say, Elizabeth, to you, because having come to the harp as an adult that I've talked about, I, in the beginning, lost any orientation towards myself. And I got very caught in getting it right and getting the technique around, and, living with a professional folk musician gave me a real sense of inadequacy with that. And so when I finally shifted to say, what sounds good to me? What do I love? And I started learning tunes based on tunes that, after I'd been to sessions or listened to CDs, that were going through my head. That's how I began to decide what songs and tunes I was going to learn. Is if I had listened and they had resonated in me to where I was hearing them go through my head, that then gave me an internal energetic connection to want to practice and develop whatever technique was needed, So, I'm thinking about, for me, for DHC, it would be simple, but the butterfly, the Irish jig, the butterfly. To me, that's a little bit complex, but I love the tune enough that I could stay with it and bring myself, stay oriented to me. So I just wanted to say that I think that the real takeaway is that we really, to find the simple, we have to be oriented to ourselves. And we have to realize that it is our energy that enlivens whatever the form is.
Yeah, I want to go back to what you're saying about the butterfly, because it is a tricky tune. And one of the things that I noticed from myself in life and music is that when we hear something like that, we're dazzled. Like, I remember when I heard Kim Robertson play that, and we're like, I want to play that. And we're dazzled by all the complexity that someone else brings to it. And yet, in order for me to engage in it, I literally had to play it with others where I was only playing a single note so that I was in the game. And this is what I do a summer harp jam class where it's all about being in the game, playing something simple until you're grounded in it and can be part of it. Because maybe I couldn't play all those notes at first, but I could be part of the playing of all those notes, even when I was just playing a single note. And then that's what it's like to be in an orchestra. That's one. I'm not an orchestra person, but what I mean is to be part. When I was a little kid playing with adults, and I was playing my one little part, but I was part of that. And then the other thing that I always forget is that even with things outrageously complex that we've seen done really fast, there is an incredible beauty in playing them really slowly. And I'll just bring one in here so you can see that, it might be really exciting, or that might be really, really, really exciting. And yet there's an incredible beauty in actually playing just the individual notes. And I often think about, what if I only had two fingers, one finger on each hand? What would I do then? How could I engage and really love each thing that I'm doing? And again, ground in it. And again, I'm able to see this in music and appreciate it in music and share it, and am always looking for how can I understand that in the other parts of life.
Yeah, and again, and I think the grounding is so important, and it starts with the grounding and the being of our own body, mind, and again, breaking it down and attention, tracking that those thoughts and images arise from emotions that are connected to body sensation, and that the more that we can see that connection, then once we're down at the body sensation level, we have so many other possibilities. But by the time it's up into a thought or idea, we've got the form that can lock us in.
And then I'm living in overwhelm rather than living in the simple. So I'm realizing that I can even practice this with music, that not only can I play a single note, but I can really experience everything literally in my body. I can get so much from that single note, and that I want to do that with the other parts of my life as well, bringing my body into it. So
yeah, and it is that experiencing, again, that orienting to oneself and that internal experiencing, that then the music and the instrument of the harp or the voice or the composing, the art of composing, allows a vehicle for the expressing of the experiencing of the simple of the moment in our own body, mind, being.
Well, thank you, Kathleen. Thank you so much for this conversation, and thank you so much to Francine and Elizabeth and Jason and JT, and thank you for being part of this, and thank you, Sarah, for being our on-air producer and for getting us up here. And I know both Kathleen and I need to go to the vet, and you need to go off. And I just love that we got to have this connection this morning. Thank you so much. And for everybody who's watching afterwards, I'm really looking forward to the next conversation and where it goes. Thank you so much.